and it's time for the show. Let's be reasonable. And of course, this is a weekend. So we're here to do the top 5 news stories of the week. And boy, I don't think this week disappoints. So we're going to just jump right into this show right now and just kind of get to it and get it over with, right? So in the number 5 spot, we got to talk about Jim Jordan's pressure campaign, right? The pressure campaign to become Speaker of the House reached a feverish pitch today and saw things that were kind of interesting. So we're going to listen to this portion and talk about it on the other side.
People's business.
4 GOP lawmakers initially backed Jordan, but switched their votes Wednesday against him, including Iowa's Marionette Miller Meeks. She said she's getting credible death threats and a barrage of threatening calls, but will not bend to bullies. And New York's Nick LaLota, who hasn't backed Jordan, shared a threat he received, telling him to go F himself and die. Jordan has condemned all threats against colleagues, writing it's imperative that we come together.
Is an embarrassment, and this is not what we should be dealing with.
Okay. So Jim Jordan's goons out there doing the work, right? They're doing the work in order to put pressure on Republican members to vote for him to become the next Speaker of the House. But I got to tell you, I mean, if you really think about it, this story got even, well, I think you probably should need to hear some of the threats. So hang on just for a second. Let's load that up so you can hear that too, because that is the icing on the cake. Once we get on the other side of this, then I'll tell you my take.
Why is your husband such a pig? Why would he get on TV and make an asshole of himself? Because he's a deep state prick? Because he doesn't represent the people? So what we're going to do is we're going to come follow you all over the place. We're going to be up your ass nonstop. We are now Antifa. We're going to do what the left does because your of a husband gets on TV. Oh, the bad guys, they did so. I'm going to vote for Kevin McCarthy, a piece of shit who everybody knows. And for his piece of shit ass, talk about Americans who are actually fighting for Americans as the bad people, says everything about him. So you, your husband, and we're not like the left. We aren't violent, but we're going to follow your ass, every appointment you have, everything you can do. Your husband's an asshole. You should talk to his stupid ass. We're at war. Israelis being killed, and your dumb husband is acting like a 2-year-old. No wonder. He's a warmongering piece of shit. So listen, you're going to keep getting calls and emails. I'm putting all your information over the internet now. Everybody else is, and you will not be left alone because your husband, Jim Jordan, or more conservative, or you're going to be molested like you can't ever imagine. And again, non-violently. You won't go to the beauty parlor. Now, you must be a bitch to marry an ugly motherfucker like that.
Wow. So there you have it. That's what membership in the Republican Party is hearing from Jim Jordan's group. Now, I'm gonna tell you. Look, I would say, I grew up in the city. And I would say I grew up in the hood, but I like to say I'm in the hood, but not of the hood. If you know what I mean. What I'm saying is, I was in the hood, right? But my mother is a minister, so it's kind of hard for a minister's kid to get out there and do stuff like that. However, I will say this. At some point, man, if you're getting threatening emails like this and phone calls, and if they acted on even a portion of what they said that they were going to do, man, I don't know about you. I wouldn't be afraid. I'd be pretty honked up. I'd be pissed off. So, I mean, I don't understand, these guys are willing to accept that. And that's not what's supposed to happen in polite society, right? So, I mean, we heard that Jim Jordan denied it, right? But look, I'm gonna tell you, he authorized it. He knows the pressure campaign. This is what this caucus, not the Republican caucus, but the Freedom Caucus This is how they operate. This is how they operate. So this portion of the wing of the Republican Party in the House, this is on brand for what it is that they do. So when you see these threats and you hear these threats, I know exactly who it's coming from every time. Because, I mean, let's think about it. Steve Scalise ran for Speaker. Did we hear anything about a pressure campaign? No, no. And Steve Scalise kind of dropped out gracefully, right? Jim Jordan. This is the only time you hear about this pressure campaign. So I'm not, maybe we don't have enough information to say, yes, this is them, but I can point a finger and say, this is starting to smell a little fishy. This sounds on brand with everything else that the political tactics that you see where they do a lot of this stuff. It's coming from one particular area of the Republican Party. I don't know about you, but man, I'd have to go to Jim Jordan's office. If I got that threat, I'd have to go to Jim Jordan's office because I would need to know. I need to know a few things, and I'd have to make a couple things crystal clear. That, especially, I mean, if I'm gonna get threats like this, you're sending them after me, I'm coming after you. So that would have to be the way that it goes. Otherwise, I mean, that stuff just kind of continues, and they think it's okay. It's not okay. You don't do that in polite society. Number 5 story, Jim Jordan and the threats. Man, oh man, oh man, not cool. Okay, so this leads us to the number 4 story of the week, and this would be Jim Jordan's campaign to become speaker, right? We heard about the threats, and now let's hear what's happening on the other side of that. So let's hear the rest of this story brought to us by CBS. So give me a second, let's load this up and hear the rest of it here. This is important information.
There's a growing push from both sides of the aisle to potentially expand the powers of interim Speaker Patrick McHenry so the House can resume legislative business.
There is not consensus, clearly, on who the next speaker should be. And so in the immediate, we need to get back to work. We need to allow Patrick McHenry to do the job as Speaker pro tem with the authority to govern.
What do you say to those who feel that's just kicking the can down the road?
We can't waste any more time.
He pretty much said they can't waste any more time. This is what happened. It's the weekend, so we already know what happened. So Jim Jordan, on the first ballot, he got 200 votes. After the pressure campaign came to light, his 200 votes was down to 199. When we started learning about what the threats were, his third ballot on Friday was down to 194. No way for him to get there, right? No way for him to get, he's going the wrong way. I mean, he needs to get 217. No way to get 217. He's pissed off members of his own caucus with trying to get pressure on people to vote for him. You know what? If you're a good guy, people vote for you. If you're not a good guy, guess what? People have some decisions to make. They have to weigh the pros versus the cons, the good versus the bad. They look at you and maybe they make some concessions or maybe they don't. And in this case, they didn't. So, and when it comes to Jim Jordan, they pushed him out on Friday afternoon after a secret ballot where he was not able to get a consensus, a majority consensus from secret ballot. So here we are now. It's the weekend, and the Republicans are no closer to electing a Speaker of the House. And it's so rich and not lost on me to hear, complaints from like Kevin McCarthy blaming Democrats for not supporting him and all the rest of it. Well, Kevin didn't offer Democrats anything. And that's the thing about it. See, Republicans believe they can get this done themselves. They believe that if any legislation requires any lifting from Republicans or any type of bipartisanship from Republicans, it's bad for the district. So they think. But I'm here to tell you, this is not how Congress functions. It doesn't function this way. So when you see these people acting this way and you see these responses, it's not uncommon to see what we're left with. We're left with a speakerless House. We're left with the House with which is paralyzed. I mean, they can't do anything by committee, right? Even even their own Biden crime family hearing that they were having, they can't even do that because there's no legislative work to be done. There's no hearings to be heard. They don't even have a speaker. They don't have a direction in which to go in. So here we are. We're at the end. I do believe this is the full second week without a speaker, right? So at this point, I told you last week the Whisper campaign, there's going to be some Republicans that start moving in the direction of the Democrats in order to get some type of coalition to coalesce around a Republican candidate, right? Right? Or this is a long shot. It's still a long shot, but I said probably 3 or 4 videos ago, back in the 1st of October when this started happening, that Republicans are going to mess around and end up electing Hakeem Jeffries, Speaker of the House. All right, so I just stay tuned. We're at the point where the whispers are starting to get a little bit louder because I got to tell you, who's going to be the Speaker? It's not going to be McHenry, the guy that's the pro tem. Right? It's not Scalise. It's not Jordan. I guess the only other person left from the McCarthy leadership would be Stefanik, right? I don't think she wants the job. The person that started this whole thing, Matt Gaetz, doesn't want the job. The guy that was complaining the most, doesn't even want the job. So when he doesn't want the job, what does that say? We went down on this exercise for nothing. So we're left without a speakership. And I got to tell you, go back to the threats. Here's a guy threatening by voicemail, right? And he's telling America how big of a piece of shit Kevin McCarthy is. That's crazy. So, and he's mad at a guy for supporting Kevin McCarthy as opposed to supporting Jim Jordan. The whole thing is just rich. There's rich irony throughout all of this. But at the end of the day, the Whisper campaign gets a little bit louder. There's going to be some movement. I believe the week of the 23rd, there's going to be some movement. There's going to be some movement in the direction of trying to get some government that does work. They're going to have to reach across the party line, and the overtures will start. And of course, we'll start to hear the different things that Democrats will want. If you want Democrat support in order to get your speaker elected, right? So, and I can tell you right now, a couple of things that are going to be on that list. There's going to be some committees that Democrats are going to want to chair. We're going to have to help you. We're going to get something in return. And guess what? Those hearings about Biden and the crime family and the rest of that, got to go. So, I mean, if it were me, those would be my 2 demands. You need my help to push this ball down the road. Here's what I'm going to need in response. And, if they get the votes from Democrats, and you know what? Republicans are so petty, right? So petty. I mean, it wasn't even Democrats' fault from the beginning that they couldn't elect a speaker. It's their fault. But what do they do in response? They make it look like Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, Democrats, are responsible. They kick them out of their offices. It's really weird. It's a really weird impulse. I know it has to be some psychological disorder that they're displaying. I'm not saying that they have it, but they like to play the game. There's a game that they're playing there because the psychology of it just makes no sense. Why kick out Nancy Pelosi out of her office and Steny Hoyer out of his office because of some stuff that Republicans did to themselves? Makes no sense. But it's the same as McCarthy getting on TV and blaming Democrats for the loss. And Democrats are the group that put all this in motion. It's not up to Democrats to get a speaker. It's up to Republicans. But again, the whispers get a little bit louder this week. We're going to start to see some movement. Republicans are going to start coalescing to Democrats, trying to get this thing on down the road because there's nobody over there on the Republican side that's electable. Just isn't. So since there's nobody over there electable, those 20 moderates Republicans are going to have to go look at Democrats. And on the just, highly unlikely that it happens, but is it possible that some Republicans could flip and become Democrats and just give Democrats control of the House? Yes. Yes. So it's quite possible that we could see that. So everyone, stay tuned. I'm here to tell you this story is going to get even better, because I imagine if I had a crystal ball in my hand, it's probably looking like the first part of November before we get a Speaker of the House. Never mind what's going on in Ukraine. Never mind what's going on in Israel, right? Never mind the whole world is falling apart. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. What matters most is, to this group of legislators, Republican in this particular case, that feel that this is okay. That's all it is. So never mind all the stuff that's happening. It's okay. Right. So by probably the first part of November is when we'll get our new speaker. And I got to tell you, it's a crapshoot. I mean, you might as well, you got better odds in Vegas to figure out who's going to be the next Speaker of the House. So let's stay tuned and see what happens. Okay, making our way to number one. We're in the number 3 spot right now. And of course, we have to talk about Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell has done it. Sidney Powell has flipped. She has flipped on Sir Donald Trump. So you know what? Let's just listen in on this and talk about it on the other side, or talk through it. How about that?
I just have a few questions for you. Do you understand the nature of the charges that have been reaccused and that you would be pleading guilty to today?
I do, sir.
And you've heard all the rights that the state has gone through that you would waive by going forward with this plea. Do you still wish to waive those rights?
I do.
Waiving her rights. Not good.
And are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a sufficient factual basis, that there are enough facts that support this plea of guilty?
I do.
She knows she's guilty, so why fight it?
Mr. Rafferty, are you satisfied your client is competent in understanding that the plea is voluntary and that there is a sufficient factual basis for entering this plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
I agree and find that there is a sufficient factual basis, and I find this plea of guilty to be knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently entered.
Voluntarily, knowingly. All right. So she's not doing this under duress. She signed some paperwork.
There's been a request that this sentence be entered under the First Offender Act, and the court will approve that request, withhold adjudication. But I must notify you, Ms. Powell, that you're not allowed to withdraw your plea simply because you do not comply with the terms.
Can't get out of this. You can't get out of this once you agree to this plea. And what's going to happen on the other side? Let's see.
Of the sentence. And the terms of that sentence would be as recommended by the parties. On count 1, conspiracy to commit intentional interference with the performance of election duties, the sentence would be 12 months probation. And counts 2 through 6 would also be 12 months probation consecutive to each other and to count 1 for a total term of essentially 6 years probation, but we're going to translate that into months for the sentence sheet. Special conditions would include a $6,000
special condition. Let's hear this.
fine with $1,000 for each count. Restitution to be paid in the amount of $2,700 to the Georgia Secretary of State's office. You are to have written a letter, which you've already satisfied. You're also to provide a recorded proffer with the state, which you've already satisfied. You're to testify truthfully against any and all co-defendants in this matter.
Against any and all co-defendants. Why is that important? That's important because one of the people in the room that we believe is a co-defendant is Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, my man Rudy Giuliani, and a few other people were out pushing this rock up the hill about election denial and about the machines being tampered with by the Venezuelans and all the rest of this. So she's agreeing to talk about their involvement in the situation. This is a conspiracy case, right? So all of these guys, and this is Sidney Powell and Cheeseborough, both have flipped. Hey, no, not guilty, please. They're changing their pleas to guilty, right? So, and they're changing because they don't want to go to jail. That's what it comes down to. They don't. Who does? I mean, who wants to go to jail? They don't want to go to jail, so they're changing their plea. I mean, so
At any upcoming proceedings, you are not to have any communication with any witness, any co-defendant, or any member of the media concerning the facts or circumstances of this case. And you to provide all documents to the district attorney's office as requested and relevant to this case. Again, Ms. Young, I would ask if you could provide the state's recitation of the exact phrasing of these, and we'll make sure that's reflected in the final disposition form. In order to make this sentence consistent with Mr. Hall, I do believe it would be appropriate, and I'm willing to include the language involving moral turpitude, although that language being included on the sentence form may not ultimately have any effect on the entities responsible for actually determining that.
okay,
All right.
all right. So Sidney Powell working on behalf of the defense now. There you have it. So I mean, this thing. Look, Donald Trump is in trouble in New York when it comes to his empire. He's in trouble in Georgia because of the whole election denial, right? And you know what? All of this is, I mean, they got out in front of themselves on this. They needed to be able to supply evidence, and they couldn't find any evidence. So in lieu of finding evidence, they thought it would be okay to just manufacture some evidence. And when you start manufacturing stuff, that's what you start getting in trouble. You start the false electorate scheme. You start tampering with ballot boxes or ballot machines. That's illegal. All of that's illegal. So it's highly, and this is my problem that I have with most of my Republican friends when we talk about these things. I mean, look, you can be on board with the idea that elections aren't safe, right? But you must be able to prove it. And if you can't prove it, you have to deal with the system as it exists. Because the other alternative to that is to do something that is illegal. If it's illegal, people go to jail. And in this case, she's trying to avoid going to jail in order to, well, I mean, she doesn't want to go, but in order to do that, she's going to have to talk about what she knew and who was involved. And no doubt in my mind, I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but there's no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump is one of those people that she's talking to. So if that be the case, then his conspiracy part of this case gets even harder. You know, and the whole notion about going after the bigger fish, Donald Trump's the bigger fish. So Fannie Willis and these guys down in Georgia, I mean, yeah, 18 people, 18 co-defendants. Now you're down to 16 because 2 have flipped. And the 2 are going to start singing like canaries on the other 16. So it's only a matter of time. And you know what? I got to tell you, for Donald, I mean, he wants to put these cases off until after the election. He can't put this case off. Any of the federal cases, you got a better chance of putting those off, right? This one, I mean, we'll probably have a verdict on this probably sometime in the first quarter of 2024. That's not good for anybody in a primary. And again, this makes my case about Nikki Haley being the stronger candidate for Republicans. You may not want her, but I'm telling you, she's your ticket out of this wilderness. And Donald Trump has just done some major damage to the party. And there's a lot of people. The sad part about all this, and I'm not trying to go off on a rant because we got 2 more stories left, but the sad part about this is that there are a group of people in this country who feel confident that the law does not really apply to them, that they can move with impunity through anything. And I think they are starting, some of them, I mean, I've already noticed. I mean, if you look at the Jan 6 people who have been locked up and in jail for, you know, you got Terrio and a few other people, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, serving some time, 16 years, 20 years. I mean, these guys are looking at some time all over some stuff that wasn't necessarily true to begin with. They're there because of the election lies, which were never proven to be true. So they elected to go on this campaign of illegalities in order to pressure people. The pressure campaign, the Jordan pressure campaign group, looks familiar, doesn't it? Just look at it. It should look familiar because it is familiar. So, I mean, they go on these campaigns with no legality behind them. It only will end up in a bad spot. But some of these people believe that it won't catch me. But ultimately, it will. So, hey, folks, that's the number 3 story in this block. We got 2 stories left. So on to the number 2 spot. We got to talk about Ukraine and Russia. And of course, if you were listening to the news, you did learn that the Ukrainians are inflicting heavy losses on the Russians, and several regions throughout Ukraine. I think at one point they had, of course, you know, I guess I should say they got some new U.S. hardware, the ATACMS, which is kind of like a medium to long range missile that was delivered to the Ukrainians in secret. And now they are bombing supply lines of the Russians so that they're not able to fortify those positions. And of course, then they're inflicting a lot of casualties with drones. There's a report that is out that they have like since I think it's like July to today, they have trained over 10,000 drone pilots, and they knocked out several tank columns. They have scraped Russian positions where you know, they're dug in these trenches, and they've scraping these trenches. And 10,000 bodies just over the past week. But I'm here to tell you, that's not enough. It's not enough. And the reason why I say it's not enough is because when you look at this fight, I mean, it's crystal clear that the numbers favor the Russians. And Ukrainians, I may have said this before, I think it's like for every Ukrainian loss, the Ukrainians need to be inflicting 6 to maybe 7 losses on the Russian side, and it may not be enough. But the new hardware provides them with some more support from the U.S. I mean, planes aren't there, F-16s aren't there, but I heard the other day that they are training on some European fighter jets, so those will probably be entering the theater sometime soon. But so it's a hard slog going on over in Russia, over in Ukraine, and you know, my hat's off to the Ukrainians. They're trying to protect their sovereignty, and I have to say again, I mean, I made my piece known that I'm for people who are trying to protect their sovereignty, and that whether that be here in Ukraine or elsewhere. I mean, I think it's kind of not, it's not cool for you have these people that feel it's okay to just ride roughshod over your territory. So my hats off to the Ukrainians. I know they got their hands full, but more U.S. hardware is on the way. F-16, they're being trained on them, I do believe now, and some other U.S. hardware that will be making its way into the theater. And we're hoping that this is eventually successful. We're approaching almost 2 years. So this got started in 2022. So we're approaching almost 2 years of conflict in this particular region. There's no ceasefire yet. I doubt that there will be a ceasefire anytime soon. We just hope that the Ukrainians can hold out, and we hope that the issue doesn't escalate further. However, I mean, the Russians did say that the U.S. supplying the Ukrainians with the ATACMS, those missiles, is a game changer, or it wasn't good, right? So we'll see what kind of happens from there. There will be a response from the Russians on that particular front. So we'll see what happens. But my hat's off to the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian troops, heavily outmanned, but they are fighting, trying to slug it out. If they can get control of Crimea and turn this thing, I think that's a game changer for them. So it's just a matter at this point of being able to get control and hang on to it, because the land is being contested, and they're doing what they can in order to put up a strong fight. So my hat's off to Ukrainians, because I know it's definitely a hard fought battle. Okay, folks, and that brings us to the top story of the night, and we have to turn our attention back to Israel and Hamas. Over the past week, they have sustained just a bombing campaign. They're trying to logistically get ready for the ground game that is to come. And I told you, as that probably takes place, that has the potential to widen this conflict. And there's so many different things that you could say about what we see over there. I got to tell you, in the U.S. in particular, where I am, I mean, when you see it, I mean, if you don't support Israel, you're an anti-Semite, and you get canceled. Or if you see what's happening to the people of Gaza, those Palestinians, if you look at it, you have to say that. I mean, you look at the people of Gaza, since Hamas doesn't want them to leave, right? And you see the indiscriminate bombing that happens, and you say to yourself that, all they had to do was push out this particular government and we wouldn't be having this issue. And I got to tell you, I just don't see that to be the case. I see that, there haven't been free elections over in Gaza since 2007. And Hamas uses the Palestinian people as human shields in order to inflict punishment on the Israelis. So people, when you look at it, it's almost like we see the conflict, or we see the devastation, right? And it's almost like we're saying it's okay as long as it's happening to the Palestinians, but it's not. It's not. So, and when you look at, take this conversation out to a wider lens. I told you at the beginning of this, I'm a son of an evangelist, right? And I look at the story, the promise that, according to the scripture, right, that Abraham was given was that he would have possession of the land from the Wadi of Egypt to the Euphrates, right? And that area, if you know anything about that area, that encompasses people from Syria, encompasses people from Lebanon, encompasses people from the Palestinian area, right? So all of these people make up that promise. And remember, they wiped out the Hittites and the Shittites and all the Hittites and everybody that was over there, right? So this group of people who were there in that particular region, these are descendants of Abraham. And there's no story more important or more interesting to me in this, the biblical reference, is the story of Ishmael and Isaac, right? So if you're familiar with the story, Sarah couldn't have children, though she was told by the angel that she would bear a child or children. She just didn't believe it, and she allowed Abraham, or whatever you want to say, Abraham and Hagar, her handmaiden, had a child, and that child's name was Ishmael. And Ishmael, if you look at the story, it looked like Ishmael and his daddy, Abraham, they had a loving relationship. And there was some competition and some jealousy that ensued, right? Sarah gets pregnant, has children. That jealousy and rivalry went further with the birth of Jacob, right? So, Isaac, I should say. So I have to think about the story. So with Isaac, and you look at this and you say to yourself, Well, Isaac and Ishmael are paternal, full blood brothers, maternal, half brothers. They have the same daddy, different mamas, right? And when you see this story, and you just remember the blessing, right? The blessing was that they would have all of this land. And you see those two boys. Even though the story goes that Hagar and Ishmael were kicked out, and although they were kicked out and they had a blessing, they would be a blessed people and all the rest of it, the dynamics, right? But those two boys, Ishmael and Isaac, I believe, based on the scripture, I believe that they probably remained in some close contact with one another. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at Abraham's death, when Abraham died, both brothers were there. That says something to me. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be in the business of inviting anybody that I was hating on to a funeral. But both brothers were there to bury their father. And you can read the story for yourself, but they're brothers. So when you see this conflict between, in this particular place, the Palestinians and the Israelis, those two, it's not cousins. I mean, the cousins are what you see in Syria and Lebanon and that whole region. They're all related. Jordan, they're all related. They're all cousins. But those two, Palestine and Israel, and if I'm getting the story right, those two are brothers. So when you see this conflict, I see it as it's a challenge because you can't look at the atrocities of one and excuse it, and look at the atrocities of the other and decide that you have the right to inflict further atrocities. I mean, it's a no-win situation for anybody. I don't care who you are in this conflict. When you start looking at these two groups and looking at the two sides, it's no win. And the only way we could really get this thing back to some reasonable place is to look at these boys as brothers. And you know, if we need to have some form of a two-state solution, then we need to really be about getting that done. We can't just provide lip service to that particular issue. We have to be about establishing a place that is home for the Palestinians and establishing a place that's home for Israel. And you know, at some point, it also seems somewhat suspect to me that you're willing to arm one and not arm the other. You know, and you've been doing that since the 1920s. So, I mean, it's really kind of interesting how where we are in this space. And like I said, for all those people who look at religion and they see Israel, let's say, as that timepiece of the coming of Christ, or the second coming of Christ, and all the rest of it. Okay, I'm willing to have that discussion with you at some other point, but not there. But here, but this one here, I mean, it really just kind of puts those biblical issues. You got to question why is it that we act this way, or why is it that we do the things that we do in support of or against Israel, right? So, and in support of and against Palestine. So, because they're brothers at the end of the day, and we need to really be reasonable about how do we solve these particular problems. So, okay, folks, that's the number one story of the night. Go out and enjoy the remainder portion of your weekend. We got a busy week ahead of us for next week because, boy, there's some things lining up next week that also look to be great news stories. So we'll just kind of watch them as they bring themselves to light. So, hey, we're done. Like and share this conversation. Share with your family and friends. Answer some of those questions. Let's give me some comments. What do you think? What do you think? Are they brothers? Are these two brothers? And if they are there better ways that we could be handling the discourse over in the Middle East? Think about that and let me know your thoughts. But otherwise, folks, enjoy your weekend. Look forward to talking to you next week.